What happens when a wrong number changes everything? When loneliness leads to the most dangerous call of your life? Stay with us for a story that will make you question whether some mistakes are actually destiny in disguise. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's diner buzzed like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across Emma Rodriguez's exhausted face as she wiped down the same table for the fourth time that night. At 24, she had already perfected the art of invisible existence, working double shifts at the 24-hour diner on Chicago's South Side, going home to a studio apartment that barely qualified as livable, and repeating the cycle with the mechanical precision of someone who had given up on dreams. The clock above the ancient coffee machine read 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that felt like it had lasted 3 days. Only a handful of customers remained scattered across the cracked vinyl booths. Marcus, the long-haul trucker who stopped in every week and always ordered the same thing. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who came in every night because her empty house held too many memories. And a businessman in an expensive suit who'd been staring at his laptop screen for hours without typing a single word, his coffee growing cold as he wrestled with whatever demons kept him awake. Emma's phone buzzed against her hip, the vibration cutting through her exhausted haze. She pulled it out with hands that trembled slightly from too much caffeine and too little sleep. A text from her landlord, Mr. Kowalski. Rent's due tomorrow. No extensions this time. Pay or pack. Her stomach dropped like a stone. After covering Sarah's shifts when she'd called in sick with the flu and missing 2 days of work herself when she'd caught the same bug, Emma was still $43 short of rent. She glanced around the nearly empty diner, calculating tips in her head. Even if every remaining customer left her a 20, which they wouldn't, she'd still be short. Emma, honey, you look like death warmed over. Called Jerry Martinez, the night manager. From behind the counter where he was cleaning the ancient grill, Jerry was one of the few bright spots in Emma's life, a 50-something former Marine who treated his employees like family and actually cared whether they made it home safely. Why don't you head out early? It's deader than disco in here. Emma nodded, untying her grease-stained apron with fingers that wouldn't quite cooperate. Thanks, Jerry. See you tomorrow. Get some sleep, kid. And Emma? Jerry's voice carried the weight of genuine concern. If you need an advance on your paycheck, just ask. We've all been where you are. The kindness in his voice almost broke her. Emma managed a weak smile and a nod before grabbing her threadbare coat from the employee closet. Outside, Chicago's February wind cut through her thin jacket like ice-cold knives, and the broken streetlight at the bus stop flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that made her skin crawl. The bus schedule posted at the stop was barely readable, covered in graffiti and weather damage, but Emma knew it by heart. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another hour and 12 minutes. Walking home would take 45 minutes through neighborhoods that made the evening news for all the wrong reasons. But staying here alone in the dark felt even more dangerous. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, looking for someone, anyone, who might still be awake and willing to talk. The list was depressingly short. Her sister Maria had moved to Los Angeles 6 months ago, chasing dreams of becoming an actress and escaping the suffocating weight of their family's expectations. With the 3-hour time difference, Maria would be asleep. Her college roommate, Jessica, had stopped returning calls after Emma had to decline one too many invitations to expensive restaurants and weekend trips she couldn't afford. Her parents, well, they'd made their feelings about her life choices crystal clear when she'd dropped out of Northwestern to take care of her dying grandmother. The loneliness felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She needed to hear a friendly voice, someone who cared whether she made it home safely, someone who would notice if she simply disappeared from the world. In her contacts, she found Maria, emergency, and hit call without looking closely at the number. Her fingers were numb from the cold, and the screen was cracked from when she'd dropped it last month and couldn't afford to fix it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? The voice that answered was deep, gravelly, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Definitely not Maria's cheerful California drawl. Oh, I'm sorry. Emma stammered, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. I think I dialed the wrong number. I was trying to reach my sister. Wait. The voice was sharp now, commanding in a way that made Emma's spine straighten involuntarily. Don't hang up. Who is this? Something in his tone made her freeze, her finger hovering over the end call button. There was an authority in his voice that spoke of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. I'm sorry, I really did dial wrong. Your number showed up on my phone. That's not supposed to happen. There was a pause, and Emma could hear muffled voices in the background, speaking in what sounded like Italian. How did you get this number? Emma's heart began to race, her breath coming faster now from more than just the cold. I don't understand. I was just calling my sister. This must be some kind of mistake. Mistakes like this don't happen with this phone. The background voices grew more urgent, and she heard what sounded like chairs scraping against a floor. What's your name? Every instinct screamed at her to hang up, to run, to pretend this conversation had never happened. But something about his voice, beneath the authority and the barely controlled tension, there was curiosity rather than anger, intelligence rather than mindless threat. Emma Rodriguez. He repeated her name slowly like he was tasting each syllable, committing it to memory. And where are you calling from, Emma Rodriguez? Chicago. Look, I'm really sorry about this. I'll just delete this number and pretend this never happened. No. The word was final, brooking no argument. Don't delete anything. Don't call this number again. And Emma, yes? Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Be very careful who you trust. The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at her phone in the flickering light of the broken street lamp. She looked at her call log and felt her blood turn to ice water. The number she'd called wasn't Maria's at all. Somehow, her finger had dialed a completely different sequence, one that wasn't anywhere in her contacts, one that she'd never seen before in her life. The bus arrived with a wheeze of brakes and a cloud of diesel exhaust that made her cough. As Emma climbed aboard, fishing in her pocket for exact change, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed a line she didn't even know existed. The mysterious man's warning echoed in her mind. Be very careful who you trust. As the bus lurched into motion, carrying her through the dark streets toward home, Emma had no idea that her life had just changed forever. In a penthouse office across the city, Vincent Torrino was already making phone calls, setting wheels in motion that would bring their worlds crashing together in ways neither of them could imagine. Emma barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that voice, deep, commanding, with an undertone of danger that made her skin prickle. Be very careful who you trust. She'd checked her phone a dozen times, confirming that the number she'd called wasn't anywhere in her contacts. Somehow her finger had dialed a completely random sequence that had connected her to who? And why had he seemed so concerned about her number appearing on his phone? By 5:30 a.m., she gave up on sleep entirely and got ready for her morning shift at the diner. Jerry had called in sick with the same flu that had been making its way through the staff, which meant Emma would be pulling a double shift, 16 hours on her feet for barely enough money to cover rent, assuming the tips were decent. The pre-dawn streets of Chicago were eerily quiet as she walked to work, her footsteps echoing off empty storefronts and abandoned buildings. The morning crowd at Murphy's would start filtering in around 6. Construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, office workers who couldn't afford Starbucks, and the occasional police officer looking for a cheap meal and a warm place to sit. Emma unlocked the diner and went through the opening routine she could perform in her sleep. Starting the coffee, firing up the grill, checking that the ancient cash register was working. The familiar tasks helped calm her nerves, but she couldn't shake the memory of that phone call. The first customer of the day was Tony Castellano, sliding onto his usual stool at the counter at exactly 6:15 a.m. Tony was a regular, mid-50s, always impeccably dressed in expensive suits despite eating at a dive diner, and he tipped better than anyone else. He claimed to work in import-export, but Emma had always suspected there was more to his story. There was something about the way he carried himself, The way his eyes constantly scanned the room, the way other customers seemed to give him a wide berth without even realizing they were doing it. "Morning. Beautiful," Tony said with his usual charming smile. "You look like you've been wrestling with demons all night." "Thanks, Tony. Really what every girl wants to hear first thing in the morning." Emma poured his usual black coffee, noting that her hands were steadier than they'd been a few hours ago. "Rough night. Anything you want to talk about?" Tony's voice carried genuine concern, and his dark eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. Emma hesitated. Tony had always been kind to her, asking about her life, remembering details about her struggles with rent and her family situation. He'd even offered to lend her money once, though she'd been too proud to accept. But something about last night's phone call made her cautious about sharing anything with anyone. "Just couldn't sleep," she said finally, refilling the sugar dispensers to avoid meeting his eyes. Tony studied her face with the sharp attention of someone who made his living reading people. "You know, Emma, in my line of work, I've learned that when someone can't sleep, it's usually because they're worried about something. And when people are worried, sometimes they make poor decisions. Decisions that can have consequences they never saw coming." Before Emma could ask what he meant by that cryptic statement, the bell above the door chimed with unusual force. 3 men in dark hoodies entered, moving with a purposeful stride that immediately set Emma's nerves on edge. They didn't look like the usual morning crowd, too well dressed beneath the casual clothes, too alert, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of military or law enforcement training. They took the corner booth, the one with a clear view of the entire diner and both exits. One of them kept glancing at Emma while pretending to read the laminated menu, his eyes tracking her movements as she went about her morning routine. "Tony," she whispered, refilling his cup with hands that weren't quite steady anymore. "Do you know those guys?" Tony turned slightly, his movement casual but his eyes sharp and calculating. When he turned back to Emma, his entire demeanor had changed. The friendly regular was gone, replaced by someone who radiated quiet authority and barely contained tension. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," he said in a low voice that wouldn't carry beyond the counter. "In about 5 minutes, you're going to tell Dave you're feeling sick and need to go home. You're going to walk out the back door, not the front. You're going to go straight home and stay there until someone contacts you." "What? Tony, what's going on?" "You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the counter with practiced nonchalance. "If anything happens, anything at all, you call this number. Ask for Vincent. Tell him Tony sent you." Emma looked at the card. It was plain white with just a phone number embossed in black, no name or business logo. The paper felt expensive, substantial. "Tony, I don't understand what's happening. You made a phone call last night." "To the wrong number?" Tony's voice was barely audible now. "That call has consequences, Emma. Consequences that are walking through that door right now." Emma's blood turned to ice. "How do you know about because it's my job to know?" Tony stood up, leaving a $50 bill for a $3 cup of coffee. "Remember what I said. Back door 5 minutes. And Emma?" He paused, his hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens next, remember that not everyone in this situation is your enemy." As Tony walked toward the front door, he paused at the booth with the 3 hooded men. Emma couldn't hear what he said, but she saw their reaction. A subtle straightening, a quick exchange of glances, one of them reaching for something inside his jacket before thinking better of it. Tony nodded once and left, but not before making eye contact with Emma and tapping his watch. 5 minutes. The men stayed, their attention now focused entirely on Emma. She could feel their eyes following her as she moved behind the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Dave emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a grease-stained apron. "Where's Jerry?" he asked, looking around the empty diner. "Called in sick," Emma managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Dave, I'm really not feeling well either. Could I possibly—" "Yeah, sure, whatever." Dave grunted without really looking at her. "You look like crap anyway. Don't want you getting the customers sick." Emma grabbed her purse from under the counter, acutely aware that the three men were watching her every move. She forced herself to walk normally toward the back of the diner, past the restrooms, toward the employee exit that led to the alley behind the building. Just as she reached for the door handle, she heard the bell chime again. Through the small window in the kitchen door, she saw more men entering, at least 4 more, all dressed similarly, all moving with that same purposeful stride that spoke of coordination and planning. Her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Emma pushed through the back door into the alley behind the diner. The morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows between the buildings and painting the brick walls in shades of gold and amber. She started walking quickly toward the street, but froze when she heard footsteps behind her. Emma Rodriguez. She turned slowly, her mouth dry as dust. One of the hooded men stood at the mouth of the alley, blocking her path to the street. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance. Despite the casual clothes, there was something unmistakably professional about him. The way he stood, the way his hands remained visible but ready, the way he positioned himself to control the space. "You need to come with us," he said calmly, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "I don't know what you want, but I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice came out smaller than she intended, barely above a whisper. "No one said you did anything wrong. But you made a phone call last night, and that phone call has consequences that need to be addressed." Emma's blood turned to ice water. The wrong number. Somehow, impossibly, these men were here because of a simple mistake. A moment of loneliness and cold fingers on a cracked phone screen. "I can explain," she said quickly, the words tumbling over each other. "It was an accident. I was trying to call my sister, and I dialed wrong. I didn't mean to call whoever I called. I don't even know who it was. We know." The man stepped closer, and Emma could see more figures emerging from the shadows. The other men from the diner, plus several she hadn't seen before. They formed a loose circle around the alley, cutting off any escape route with military precision. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" "Please," Emma whispered, her back against the brick wall of the diner. "I won't tell anyone. I'll forget the number, forget the call ever happened. I just want to go home." The man studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he pulled out a phone and dialed a number. "We have her," he said when someone answered. A pause. "Yes, sir." "She's exactly what you described." Another pause, longer this time, and Emma could hear a voice on the other end, though she couldn't make out the words. "Understood, sir." He hung up and looked at Emma with something that might have been sympathy. "Change of plans, Miss Rodriguez." "You're not going home. You're coming with us." "Where?" The word came out as barely a breath. "To meet the man you called last night." The black SUV moved through Chicago's streets like a predator stalking prey, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun as it carried Emma deeper into parts of the city she'd only seen in news reports about crime and violence. She sat in the back seat between 2 silent men, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white, and her fingers were starting to go numb. They'd been driving for 30 minutes now, leaving behind the familiar neighborhoods of her life and entering an industrial district that seemed to exist in a different world entirely. Warehouses and shipping containers stretched as far as she could see, interspersed with buildings that looked abandoned but somehow felt very much alive with hidden activity. "Where are you taking me?" she asked for the 4th time, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. The man to her left, the one who'd spoken to her in the alley, finally answered. "Somewhere safe? Safe for who?" He almost smiled at that, a ghost of expression that was gone before she could be sure she'd seen it. "Good question, Miss Rodriguez. Very good question." The SUV turned into what looked like an abandoned industrial complex, past rusted gates and crumbling concrete barriers. But as they approached the main building, Emma noticed details that didn't fit the abandoned facade. Security cameras at every corner, their lenses tracking the vehicle's movement. Men in expensive suits standing at strategic positions, their postures alert and professional. and cars that cost more than she made in 5 years, parked in designated spots throughout the lot. They escorted her through a side entrance that required multiple keycards and biometric scanners to access. The interior was a stark contrast to the building's exterior, clean, modern, with the kind of understated luxury that spoke of serious money and serious power. They took an elevator that required yet another keycard to operate, rising smoothly and silently to what Emma assumed was the top floor. When the doors opened, Emma stepped into a world that defied everything she'd expected. The space was elegant, almost palatial. Polished hardwood floors that reflected the light from massive floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, and artwork that she was pretty sure she'd seen in magazines about millionaire lifestyles. The windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago that took her breath away. She could see the lake in the distance, the downtown skyline, and neighborhoods that looked like toy models from this height. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, a reminder of how high up she was, how far she was from anything familiar or safe. "Miss Rodriguez?" Emma turned toward the voice and felt her breath catch in her throat. The man standing behind a massive oak desk was not what she'd expected at all. He was younger than she'd imagined, maybe early 30s, with dark hair. That was perfectly styled, sharp features that belonged on a movie screen, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance with the precision of a computer scanner. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her rent for an entire year, but it was his presence that struck her most. He commanded the room without effort, radiating a quiet authority that made everyone else seem smaller by comparison. This was someone who was accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room he entered. "You're him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The man I called." "I am." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk, the movement graceful and controlled. "Please sit." Emma remained standing, her legs trembling but her spine straight. "I want to know what's going on. Why did you have your men bring me here? What do you want from me?" "My name is Vincent Torrino," he said, ignoring her questions, and moving around the desk with a slight limp that he tried to hide. "And you, Emma Rodriguez, have created a very interesting problem for both of us." "I told you, it was an accident. I was trying to call my sister. I know." He moved closer, and Emma noticed that despite his youth, there were lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and responsibility beyond his years. "The question is, how does someone accidentally dial a number that doesn't officially exist?" Emma stared at him, confusion mixing with fear. "What do you mean doesn't officially exist?" "The number you called last night is routed through 7 different encrypted servers across 3 countries. It's not listed in any directory, not connected to any public network, and it changes every 72 hours. The only people who have access to it are—" He paused, studying her face with those penetrating dark eyes. "Well, let's just say they're people who have earned the right to contact me directly through very specific channels." "That's impossible. I just dialed randomly." "No, you didn't." Vincent moved to a wall-mounted screen and touched it, bringing up a display that made Emma's stomach drop to her feet. It showed her phone number, her call log, and information that made her feel sick. "According to our telecommunications analysis, you've called that number 17 times over the past 6 months." "That's not true!" Emma stepped forward, anger overriding fear for the first time since this nightmare had begun. "I've never called that number before in my life. I don't even know who you are." Vincent watched her reaction carefully, his expression unreadable. "Either you're an exceptional liar, or someone has been using your phone without your knowledge to establish a pattern of contact." The implications hit Emma like a physical blow. "Someone's been, but that's impossible. My phone is always with me." "Is it?" Vincent touched the screen again, and Emma's call history appeared in detail that made her feel violated. "Think carefully, Emma. Has anyone had access to your phone? Anyone at all?" Emma's mind raced through the past few months, trying to remember every moment, every interaction. Her phone was always in her purse or her pocket, except when she was working, and then it was in her locker or behind the counter where she could keep an eye on it. Or her blood ran cold as the realization hit her. "The diner," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "When I'm working, I leave it charging behind the counter. Anyone could have." "Who has access to that area?" "The staff. Some of the regulars who know us well." Emma's voice trailed off as she remembered Tony's strange behavior that morning. His warning. The business card he'd given her with just a phone number. Vincent noticed her expression change. "You thought of someone." Emma pulled Tony's card from her pocket with trembling fingers. Vincent took it, and his expression darkened immediately, a storm cloud passing over his features. "Where did you get this?" "A regular customer gave it to me this morning. He told me to call if anything happened, to ask for." Emma's voice died as she realized what she was about to say. "Ask for Vincent," he finished, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Tony Castellano. I should have known he was behind this. You know him?" Vincent's laugh was cold and humorless. "Tony works for my uncle. My uncle who's been trying to find a way to contact me directly for months, despite the fact that I've made it very clear I want nothing to do with his particular brand of family business." Emma sank into the chair she'd refused earlier, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "I don't understand any of this. My uncle Salvatore Torrino wants to retire from the family business, but he doesn't trust me to take over operations, because I've been trying to legitimize our enterprises, move away from the more traditional activities." Vincent moved to the windows, looking out at the city below with the air of someone who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "So he's been testing me, creating situations to see how I handle them, whether I'm willing to do what he considers necessary to protect the family. And what does that have to do with me? Using your phone to call me, then having you followed, bringing you here. It's all been orchestrated to see what I would do with an innocent civilian who stumbled into our world." Vincent turned back to her, his expression grave. "It's a test, Emma, and depending on how I handle it, it could determine the future of everything I've been working to build. And what are you going to do?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face as if he were trying to read her soul. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried an undertone of steel. "That depends on you, Emma Rodriguez. Depends on me?" Emma's voice cracked like thin ice. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to call my sister and hear a friendly voice." Vincent returned to his desk, but instead of sitting behind it in a position of authority, he leaned against the front edge, bringing himself closer to her eye level. The gesture seemed calculated to appear less threatening, but Emma wasn't fooled. Everything about this man was calculated. "No, you didn't ask for this. But you're here now, and that creates a problem for both of us that won't simply disappear because we wish it would." "What kind of problem?" "You've seen this place. You know my name, my face. You've been brought into something that most people spend their entire lives successfully avoiding." He paused, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "In my world, that usually ends one of two ways." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. "And those ways are? You disappear permanently, or you become part of the family." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, each syllable carrying the weight of finality. Emma stared at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking, but his expression remained serious, almost regretful. "Those are my only options? Death? Or what? Becoming a criminal?" "You wouldn't be a criminal," Vincent said quietly, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been sadness. "You'd be under my protection. There's a significant difference." "Is there?" Emma stood up abruptly, pacing to the massive windows that offered their breathtaking view of the city. Chicago spread out below her looked different now. Not the familiar home she'd known all her life, but a place full of hidden dangers and invisible boundaries she'd never known existed. What does under your protection even mean? Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when Emma turned back to look at him, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Uncertainty, as if he were wrestling with his own conscience. It means you'd work for me. Nothing illegal. I have several legitimate businesses that need managing, oversight, someone with fresh eyes and genuine integrity. He gestured toward the windows. It means you'd live in a secure apartment, have a steady income that would allow you to live comfortably, never worry about rent or food or safety again, and in exchange, you forget your old life. You don't contact your family, your friends. You become someone new, someone who never existed before today. Emma turned to face him fully, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You're asking me to disappear anyway. The only difference is whether I'm alive or dead when it happens. Yes, Vincent said simply, and the honesty of his answer hit her harder than any lie would have. That's exactly what I'm asking. The brutal truth of it left Emma speechless for a moment. She sank back into the chair, her mind reeling with the impossibility of the choice she was being asked to make. Why? She whispered. Why not just, let me go. I won't tell anyone. I'll move away, change my number, pretend this never happened. Because my uncle will never stop testing me, and next time he might use someone you care about. Your sister in California, for instance. Emma's blood turned to ice water. You know about Maria? I know about everything, Emma. Vincent moved to another screen on the wall, touching it to display information that made Emma feel sick. Your parents who disowned you for dropping out of Northwestern to take care of your dying grandmother. Your ex-boyfriend who stole your savings and disappeared. The eviction notice you're expecting next week because you're 3 months behind on rent. Each revelation was like a physical blow. Emma watched her life laid out in clinical detail, bank statements, employment records, even photos she didn't remember taking. Your sister Maria, who moved to Los Angeles 6 months ago and is currently working as a waitress while auditioning for commercials. She lives at 1247 Sunset Boulevard, apartment 3B, and she has no idea that her big sister is struggling to survive in Chicago. Stop, Emma whispered, tears burning her eyes. I know you work 16-hour shifts at a diner where the owner pays you under minimum wage and skims from your tips. I know you eat 1 meal a day and haven't bought new clothes in 8 months. I know you lie awake at night wondering if anyone would notice if you simply disappeared. Stop. Emma's voice cracked like a whip, anger flaring through the tears. So what? So I'm poor and alone and pathetic. That doesn't mean I want to become part of whatever this is, doesn't it? Vincent moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. When was the last time someone asked how you were doing, and actually waited for an answer? When was the last time you felt safe walking home at night? When was the last time you had enough money to buy something you wanted instead of just what you needed to survive? Each question was like a knife twist, cutting through the defenses Emma had built around her loneliness and desperation. She couldn't remember the last time any of those things had been true. That's not the point, she said weakly, but even she could hear how hollow the words sounded. Isn't it? Vincent knelt in front of her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers. Up close, she could see that his dark eyes held depths of pain and responsibility that seemed far too heavy for someone his age. Emma, I'm not asking you to become a criminal. I'm offering you a life where you matter to someone, where your safety is someone's priority, where you never have to choose between paying rent and eating. But I'd be trapped. You're already trapped. The only difference is that this cage comes with better food and a guarantee that no one will hurt you. Emma stared into his dark eyes, searching for deception, for manipulation, for the cold calculation she expected from someone in his position. But what she saw there was something she hadn't expected. Genuine concern, and something that looked almost like loneliness. Why do you care? She asked. You don't even know me. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his expression becoming distant. Because I know what it's like to be alone, to feel like the world has forgotten you exist, like you're just going through the motions of living without actually being alive. He stood up, moving back to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. And because my uncle chose you specifically to test me. He wanted to see if I'd kill an innocent person to protect my secrets, or if I'd find another way. He wanted to see if I'm still the man he raised, or if I've become something else entirely. And what did you decide? I decided that maybe it's time to stop letting other people make choices for me. He turned back to her, and Emma saw something new in his expression, determination mixed with what might have been hope. The question is, are you ready to stop letting other people make choices for you? Emma thought about her life, the endless cycle of work and worry, the empty apartment that felt more like a prison than a home, the phone that never rang with good news. She thought about Maria, who'd had the courage to escape and build something new. She thought about the dreams she'd given up, the person she'd wanted to become before life had worn her down to nothing. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens to Emma Rodriguez? She gets a chance to become whoever she wants to be. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. When she opened them again, Vincent was watching her with an expression of patient understanding that somehow made the choice both easier and harder. I need to know something first, she said. Are you a good man, Vincent Torrino? The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer with the gravity it deserved. I'm not sure that's the right question. It's the only question that matters to me. Vincent moved back to his desk, his fingers tracing the edge of the polished wood. I try to be, in a world that doesn't always reward goodness, I try to protect the people who matter to me. I try to be fair, even when fairness is a luxury I can't afford. I try to remember that power is only worth having if you use it to make things better. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I can give you. He opened a drawer and pulled out a key, setting it on the desk between them. That's the key to an apartment 6 blocks from here. It's furnished, secure, and the rent is paid for the next year. There's a job waiting for you at one of my legitimate businesses, managing a small art gallery downtown. The pay is enough to live comfortably, and the work is normal. Emma stared at the key as if it were a snake that might bite her. And if I don't take it? Then you walk out of here and we never see each other again. But Emma? His voice carried a note of warning that made her look up at him. If you choose that path, you need to disappear completely. Leave Chicago tonight, change your name, never contact anyone from your old life again. Because my uncle won't stop. And next time, I might not be able to protect you. The choice crystallized in Emma's mind with startling clarity. She could return to her old life, the loneliness, the struggle, the constant fear, and spend the rest of it looking over her shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or she could step into the unknown, trading one kind of uncertainty for another, but with the promise of something better on the other side. She reached for the key. What happens now? She asked, her fingers closing around the cold metal. Vincent's expression softened, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face and made him look younger, more human. Now, Emma Rodriguez gets to find out who she really is when she's not just trying to survive. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in the middle of what would become Meridian Gallery, surrounded by paint cans, drop cloths, and the controlled chaos of renovation. The space had been empty when Vincent first showed it to her, a former bookstore in River North with good bones but decades of neglect. Now, with the help of contractors who asked no questions and worked with military efficiency, it was transforming into something beautiful. The lighting system should be installed by Friday, said Marcus, the project foreman, consulting his tablet, and the security system goes live Monday morning. Emma nodded, still amazed that people actually listened when she spoke, that her opinions mattered in ways they never had before. What about the climate control? Already done. Temperature and humidity will be maintained automatically. Marcus glanced around the space with professional satisfaction. This is going to be something special, Miss Rodriguez. Miss Rodriguez. Even her name sounded different now, carried weight and respect she'd never experienced. Vincent had been true to his word. The apartment he'd given her was beautiful, secure, and felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived since her grandmother's house. The job came with a salary that seemed almost fictional after years of scraping by on tips and minimum wage, but it was more than just the money and security. For the first time in her adult life, Emma felt like she had a purpose, something that belonged to her. Her phone buzzed, the new phone Vincent had given her, encrypted and secure. A text from him, "How's the gallery coming along?" "Better than I imagined," she typed back. "I think you're going to be surprised. I'm looking forward to it." "Dinner tonight, 8 p.m.? Emma hesitated before responding. These dinners had become a regular thing. Vincent checking on her progress, discussing the gallery, talking about art and business and life. They were professional meetings, she told herself, even though she found herself looking forward to them more than she should. "I'll be there." The restaurant Vincent had chosen was the kind of place Emma had only seen in movies. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, and prices that would have represented a week's wages in her old life. The maitre d' knew Vincent by name and led them to a private table in an alcove that offered both intimacy and a clear view of the entire dining room. "You look different," Vincent said as they settled into their seats. Happy Emma glanced down at herself. The dress was new, purchased with her first paycheck, and she'd actually had time to do something with her hair. "I feel different. Like I'm becoming someone I didn't know I could be." "Tell me about the gallery." As Emma described her vision for the space, the artist she'd been researching, the opening exhibition she was planning, she watched Vincent's face. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, offering suggestions that showed he understood both art and business. "There's a young painter I found," Emma said, her excitement building as she spoke. "Sophia Reyes. She's been working out of a studio in Pilsen. Incredible talent, but no connections. No way to get her work seen. I want to feature her in the opening show. What's her story? Immigrant family, first-generation college graduate, working 3 jobs to support her art. Her paintings they're like windows into another world, raw and beautiful and honest in a way that takes your breath away." Vincent smiled. "You're passionate about this." "I am." Emma paused, surprised by the realization. "I haven't been passionate about anything in years. I'd forgotten what it felt like. What changed?" Emma considered the question seriously. "You gave me a chance to matter. To build something instead of just surviving day to day." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a man Emma didn't recognize. Older, well-dressed, with the kind of presence that made other diners glance over nervously. He approached their table with the confidence of someone who was accustomed to going wherever he pleased. "Vincent," the man said, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your lovely companion?" Vincent's entire demeanor changed, his relaxed posture becoming alert, almost predatory. "Uncle Sal, I wasn't expecting to see you here." Emma's blood ran cold. This was Salvatore Torrino, the man who had orchestrated her entire situation, who had used her as a pawn in his family power games. "Emma Rodriguez," Salvatore said, extending his hand with old-world courtesy. "I've heard so much about you." Emma shook his hand reluctantly, noting that his grip was firm and his eyes were sharp with intelligence. "Mr. Torrino, please call me Sal. After all, we're practically family now." He pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. "I hope you don't mind if I join you for a moment. I'm curious about this gallery project I've been hearing about." "Actually, we do mind," Vincent said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "This is a private dinner. Everything is family business, nephew. Surely you haven't forgotten that." Sal turned to Emma with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, my dear, how are you finding your new life? Quite an improvement over that diner, I imagine." Emma felt like she was walking through a minefield. "It's been an adjustment. I'm sure it has. It must be difficult leaving your old life behind so completely. Your sister in Los Angeles, for instance. Does she know about your new circumstances?" The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Emma felt Vincent tense beside her, his hand moving slightly closer to his jacket. "My sister and I aren't in contact," Emma said carefully. How sad. Family is so important, don't you think? Sal's smile widened. Vincent has always been too sentimental about such things. It's both his greatest strength and his most dangerous weakness. That's enough, Vincent said quietly, but his voice carried the kind of authority that made the nearby waiters step back instinctively. Is it? Sal leaned back in his chair, completely at ease despite the tension radiating from his nephew. I'm simply getting to know the young woman who's become so important to our family's future. Emma realized she was holding her breath. The conversation was happening on multiple levels, with meanings and implications she could only guess at. The gallery opens in 2 weeks, she said, surprising herself by speaking up. You're welcome to attend the opening reception. Sal's eyebrows rose slightly. How gracious. I look forward to seeing what you've accomplished. He stood up, straightening his jacket. Vincent, we should talk soon. There are family matters that require your attention. I'll call you, Vincent said, but his tone suggested the opposite. After Sal left, the atmosphere at their table remained tense. Vincent was quiet, his dark eyes scanning the restaurant as if looking for threats. I'm sorry about that, he said finally. Is he always so... Emma searched for the right word. Dangerous? Yes, Vincent signaled for the check. We should go. As they left the restaurant, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. The encounter with Salvatore had reminded her that despite the beautiful apartment and meaningful work, she was still very much a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. Vincent, she said as they reached his car. What did he mean about family matters? Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He wants me to take over operations completely. All of them, including the parts I've been trying to eliminate. And if you refuse, then he'll find someone else. Someone who won't have any qualms about doing things the old way. Vincent looked at her, his expression grave. Someone who won't care about protecting innocent people who get caught in the crossfire. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Chicago wind. People like me. People like you. As they drove through the city streets, Emma realized that her new life, as wonderful as it had become, was built on a foundation that could crumble at any moment. The gallery, the apartment, the sense of purpose and belonging. All of it depended on Vincent's ability to navigate the dangerous waters of his family's expectations. And for the first time since she'd taken that key from his desk, Emma wondered if she'd made the right choice after all. The opening night of Meridian Gallery was everything Emma had dreamed it would be and more. The space glowed with warm light that made Sophia Reyes's paintings seem to pulse with life. And the carefully curated crowd moved through the rooms with the kind of reverent appreciation that every gallery owner hopes for. Emma stood near the entrance, wearing a black dress that made her feel elegant and professional, watching as people discovered the artist she'd chosen to showcase. Sophia stood near her largest painting, a stunning piece that captured the complexity of immigrant experience, in bold strokes and vivid colors, explaining her technique to a collector who seemed genuinely interested. You've done something remarkable here, said Dr. Patricia Chen, the art critic from the Tribune whose review could make or break a new gallery. These artists, where did you find them? They found me, Emma replied, which was true in the deepest sense. I just gave them a platform. Vincent appeared at her elbow, looking devastating in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. The Times critic just bought 2 pieces, he murmured in her ear. And there's a waiting list for Sophia's work. Emma felt a surge of pride and accomplishment, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Really? Really? You've created something special here, Emma. The evening continued to unfold like a dream. Sales exceeded Emma's most optimistic projections, and she found herself in conversations with collectors, critics, and other gallery owners who treated her as an equal, someone whose opinion mattered in the art world. But as the evening progressed, Emma noticed things that made her increasingly uneasy. Men in expensive suits who didn't seem particularly interested in art, positioned at strategic points throughout the gallery. Vincent's security team, she realized, though they blended in so well she almost missed them. And then there was the guest list. Emma had invited art lovers, collectors, and members of the cultural community. But she noticed other attendees, people who carried themselves with the same quiet authority as Vincent, who spoke in low voices and seemed to be conducting business that had nothing to do with paintings. Emma. The voice behind her made her turn. Salvatore Torrino stood there, impeccably dressed and smiling, but his presence felt like a dark cloud passing over the sun. Mr. Torrino, I'm glad you could make it. I wouldn't have missed it. This is quite an achievement. He gestured around the gallery with what seemed like genuine appreciation. You've taken something empty and made it beautiful. That's a rare gift, thank you. Walk with me, Sal said, and though it was phrased as a request, Emma understood it was a command. They moved through the gallery, Sal commenting knowledgeably on the artwork, while Emma tried to figure out what he really wanted. They ended up in the back room, away from the crowd and the noise. You've exceeded everyone's expectations, Sal said, his tone conversational. Vincent included, I think. I hope so. The question is, what happens now? Emma frowned. I don't understand. This gallery, your new life, it's all been very nice. But it was never meant to be permanent. Sal's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew cold. It was a test, my dear. A way to see if Vincent had the stomach for the difficult decisions that leadership requires. Emma's blood turned to ice. What are you saying? I'm saying that the test is over. And now it's time for Vincent to prove that he can put family loyalty above personal sentiment. You want him to kill me. The words came out as barely a whisper. I want him to do what's necessary to protect the family. What you call it is irrelevant. Emma felt the walls of the room closing in around her. But I haven't done anything wrong. I've kept my mouth shut. I've built something legitimate. You've become a liability. Vincent cares about you, which makes you a weakness that can be exploited. Sal moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. In our world, weaknesses get people killed. Vincent won't do it, won't he? Sal's smile was predatory now. He's been raised to put family first. And if he refuses, well, there are others who would be happy to take his place. Others who wouldn't hesitate to clean up his messes. Emma realized she was shaking. What do you want from me? I want you to disappear. Tonight. Leave Chicago, change your name, never contact Vincent again. Make it easy for him to choose family over sentiment. And if I don't? Then you'll force him to make a choice that will destroy him either way. If he kills you, he loses his soul. If he refuses, he loses his family and probably his life. Sal straightened his jacket. Either way, you'll be dead. The only question is how many people you take down with you. Emma stared at him, understanding finally dawning. This had never been about testing Vincent's leadership. It had been about breaking him, forcing him to choose between the man he wanted to be and the man his family needed him to be. You're not planning to retire at all, she said. You're planning to destroy him. I'm planning to save him from himself. Vincent has ideas about legitimizing our operations, going clean. Noble ideas, but naive. In our world, you can't wash the blood off your hands just by wishing it away. So you'll break him instead. I'll teach him that good intentions are a luxury he can't afford. Sal moved toward the door. You have until midnight, my dear. After that, the choice will be taken out of everyone's hands. After he left, Emma stood alone in the back room, her mind racing. Through the doorway, she could see the gallery full of people celebrating art and beauty and the possibility of something better. Vincent was visible in the crowd, talking to a collector, his face animated with genuine pleasure. Emma pulled out her phone and scrolled to Vincent's number. Her finger hovered over the call button for a long moment before she put the phone away. If she told him about Sal's ultimatum, she'd be forcing him to make exactly the choice his uncle wanted him to make. Instead, she walked back into the gallery, moving through the crowd with a smile that felt like it might crack her face. She said goodbye to Sophia, congratulated the other artists, and thanked the collectors who had made purchases. She played the role of successful gallery owner for another hour, all while her mind worked frantically on a plan. As the evening wound down and the last guests filtered out, Vincent found her in the main gallery, standing in front of Sophia's centerpiece painting. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, moving to stand beside her. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Emma said, which was true in ways he couldn't imagine. "Any regrets?" Emma looked at him. This man who had saved her from a life of desperation and given her a chance to become someone she could be proud of. Who had shown her kindness and respect and the possibility of something that felt dangerously close to love. "No regrets," she lied. Vincent smiled and moved closer, his hand finding hers. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you." "Don't." Emma pulled her hand away gently. "Not tonight. Tonight was perfect. Let's just let it be perfect." Vincent studied her face, and Emma could see the concern growing in his dark eyes. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's wonderful." Emma forced another smile. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day. Let me drive you home." "No, I'll take a cab. You should stay and make sure everything's locked up properly." Emma grabbed her purse from behind the reception desk. "Vincent? Yes? Thank you. For everything. For giving me a chance to become someone I never thought I could be." Something in her tone made Vincent step closer. "Emma, you're scaring me." "What's going on?" "Nothing's going on. I'm just grateful." She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, breathing in his cologne one last time. "Good night, Vincent." Emma walked out of the gallery before he could respond, before her resolve could crumble. On the street, she hailed a cab and gave the driver an address 3 blocks from her apartment. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, she saw Vincent standing in the gallery window, watching her leave with an expression of growing alarm. Back in her apartment, Emma moved with mechanical efficiency. She packed a single suitcase with essentials, leaving behind the beautiful clothes and expensive items that belonged to the life she was about to abandon. She wrote a letter to Vincent, explaining her decision without mentioning Sal's ultimatum, making it sound like her choice to leave. At 11:30 p.m., Emma Rodriguez walked out of her apartment for the last time. She took a bus to Union Station, bought a ticket on the next train heading west, and disappeared into the night. 3 months later, in a small town in Colorado, a woman named Elena Martinez opened a small art studio in a converted warehouse. She taught painting classes to local children and displayed work by regional artists who had never had a chance to show their pieces before. She tried not to think about Chicago, about the gallery she'd built, or about the man who had given her a chance to discover who she could become. But sometimes, late at night, she would wonder if Vincent had understood why she'd left, if he'd forgiven her for the choice she'd made. She never knew that Vincent had spent months searching for her, that he'd refused his uncle's demands and walked away from the family business entirely. She never knew that Sal had been found dead in his office 2 weeks after she'd disappeared, the victim of a power struggle that had nothing to do with her. And she never knew that Vincent had kept the gallery open, hiring a new manager but keeping her vision intact, hoping that someday she might come back to see what she'd built. In Colorado, Elena Martinez taught children to paint and helped local artists find their voices. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was a life she'd chosen freely. And sometimes that was enough. But on quiet evenings, when the mountain air carried the scent of snow and possibility, she would look toward the east and wonder what might have been if she'd been brave enough to stay and fight for the life she'd wanted, instead of running from the life she'd feared, the wrong number that had changed everything had taught her that sometimes the most dangerous calls are the ones that offer us exactly what we've always wanted. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everything you've ever dreamed of to protect the people you love. In the end, Emma Rodriguez had learned that freedom always comes with a price. The question was whether you were willing to pay it. What an incredible journey. Emma's choice to sacrifice her happiness for Vincent's safety shows us that sometimes love means letting go. Could you have made the same impossible decision? What do you think happened to Vincent after she left? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more heart-wrenching stories that will keep you thinking long after they end. Which story should we tell next? Let us know what you'd like to see.